Hello again, this is Russ Murphy from Indiana Avenue Baptist Church with your devotional today. It's the second part of the least of these and how God chooses to use people and things that we would not choose in mighty, mighty ways. I told you about a young man in our youth group on our first youth trip and named David. And our sponsor said, you need to stay with David because he sets things on fire. So as I opened up the hotel room and I was going to stay with David, another guy, I was shocked to see David asleep on the bed. He's 14 years old. I thought he'd be up just tearing everything up. But on the other side of the bed was a young man named Michael, who was 17 years old, who had just gotten saved about 3 weeks earlier. And he was reading his Gideon Bible. He was crying. And so I whispered to him, I said, Michael, are you okay? He said, do you think I could be a godly man? We talked about it tonight at the conference. And he said, do you think I could be a godly man? He's just been saved for 3 weeks. And I was so excited. And I whispered, we went through the Bible for the next 2 hours, just talking about things like being a champion and running to win and Christ in him, the hope of glory. And said, you can be anything you want to be. And you give God your want to, and he'll show you the how to. And boy, it was a great, great time to see a young man want to follow Christ so closely. Well, the next day we went to the conference that morning, went back to Lubbock that night. The kids were going to the church about 8 o'clock that night to call their parents to come pick them up. And David, the little pyromaniac guy, was in the doorway there. And he said, Russ, could I talk to you? And I said, well, sure. He said, you know, last night whenever you were talking to Michael about being a godly man, I said, yeah. He said, you thought I was asleep. I said, I sure did. He said, I wasn't. I heard every word you said. And I was wondering, do you think I could be a godly man like Michael wants to be? I said, well, sure. But first of all, you have to have Christ in your heart. Have you ever prayed to receive Christ and trust him for the forgiveness of your sins? And he said, I've never done that, but I want to. So right then and there, we prayed, and David received Christ. A few minutes later, he called one of his friends on the telephone and said, you need to come to church and get saved. His friend Brandon came up and was saved. And I want to tell you, a few months later, we're getting ready to go to our youth camp for the next summer, making preparations. And David was moving to San Antonio. And he said, could I go to youth camp with this group here? I said, well, sure. We got down there, and David was a changed person. He was so helpful and so encouraging to everybody. And on a Thursday night before the last day of camp, we have our sponsors vote on the most outstanding campers. And David was voted the most outstanding camper of the whole youth camp. And boy, to be an outstanding camper, you had to really be amazing at what you did. It was so amazing to see how God took a young man who was so troubled and disturbed, who set things on fire at one time, and used him to inspire our entire youth group, which later on became our college group. And it was just a great, great thing to see how God used somebody, the least of these, a little guy named David, to inspire an entire youth group, an entire generation. God can use you. No matter who you are, what you are, God can surely use you, the least of these. Have a good day.